Okay. Let's give this a few more seconds here. Wait to see if coming back online. Okay, guys. Hopefully we're back up. If you can see me in the chat, let me know. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. We should be back up now. And let me switch my screen back over. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Having all sorts of problems this week. Okay, so let's pick back up over here. And once again, if you're in chat, let me know if you can see everything. And if not, I will try to fix this as we go. Okay, so we've got a duplicate of our layer here in terms of the silhouettes, and now we can play with kind of iterating on these a little bit. So we'll start by just painting on top of these. So I might erase out a little bit here. Create a separate version. Okay. And if we can kind of add any sort of indication with just the silhouette of what's going on, it will make the overall design even more strong. Because obviously we can come in here and paint up details inside of these shapes. But if you can tell what's going on just from the black and white outline, then we've done our job as a design in terms of capturing a good feel here. So what's kind of cool about this is adding some support down here in the bottom. And here's where we get back into that positive and negative space correlation. So I don't really know what these are yet, these details, but I do know that it sort of makes it look more interesting. And that's kind of what we're going for here. So you can kind of use your imagination to determine whatever's going on right now. And then later we can decide for ourselves. So that's one thing we do there. Let's see with this design, what else we can do. So maybe we want to taper this a little bit more like that. And we'll play with some of these shapes a little more. All right. So who knows what this is? Could be a horse or a person right here. And then might even play with kind of looping back some designs this way. One of the kind of recurring things I've been thinking about doing for this is sort of a ship or possibly some waves, fire, things like that. And so using nature and sort of natural elements to help tell a story would be a fun kind of thing to do with this project. So you can imagine these being flames or waves or something right here, which is kind of fun. And then for this one, let's play a little bit with changing the shape up. Okay, so that's kind of cool. You can add a little bit of a lip here, and then maybe for this design, we've got sort of two smokestacks coming out. Now, who knows? It doesn't have to be, legitimate. It just has to be kind of interesting. We could even create some little visual breakup up at the top. Maybe it's a shipwreck. Could be lots of things. But just decide if we want to keep that or not. Okay. Yeah, I like that a little better. Okay, start with something kind of like that. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit just to clean up this right here. Let's turn the smoothing up to about 50. And kind of block this in. Now I noticed that I'm having a little bit of humps and bumps right here in the way this is working. So we need to reduce our spacing here to compensate for that. We'll lower the size and then do this. There we go. So you can kind of see how that is making our swoops in here as we dig into this a little smoother. And then this will also work right here. I'm going to take off that much. Something like that. Okay. Might even do something with the rim here so that it kind of cuts in. It's kind of interesting. So leave those there. All right. So you can see just by messing with these look completely different now in terms of the overall vibe. And we got one more to play with down here. So let's take a look at how we're going to sort of make this work. All right, I'm going to check on this every now and then just to make sure we're still up and running. So I apologize for the hiccups. Okay. So this is interesting. It's kind of looking a little bit more like a flower, a blossom right here. It's kind of fun. Not sure if it's sort of the style we want to go for this project, but it is kind of cool. Kind of see getting in here and doing something a bit tighter like that. I'm not really a fan of that. Okay. All right. So now that we've kind of got these into place, what I want to do is resize the way these are looking. So let us play a little bit here with these. Okay, so we'll start here. And I just want to get this close. We'll use that as our guide for the rest of these. This one's probably good. And then these two need to be a little bit bigger. Something kind of like that. Okay. We'll merge those. And then let's play a little bit with our brushes over here to see if we can generate some more interesting things. So we got our pattern generator here. Just looking for some interesting random sort of inspiration in terms of the silhouette. Kind of see where that takes us. Okay. Get in here and start kind of playing around with how these are looking. What I like about this part of the process, if we use this method, is that it kind of feels a little bit like we're sculpting. And I like the randomness of it because it really kind of opens up the possibilities for things that we can do with all this sort of stuff. So we could also throw these in a little bit just for kicks and giggles. Okay. This could be some sort of whale. Interesting idea. Not really sure how that would work. Come out over there a little bit. So maybe we got an orca here. And here's a good example of a place where we can start using silhouette to help us out a little bit. So if you just look at the basic shape of an orca, this does kind of capture it, but he could have his mouth open, which would give us a little bit more negative space to look at, right? So we have to kind of think about that kind of stuff. So let's just do a really basic, we got some teeth and it's kind of open like that. So just that right there gives us a little bit of an in to kind of play with some of that negative space. I'm not gonna, solve all of our problems, but enough to make a bit of a difference. Okay, play with this a little bit. Not entirely sure if these would go out this way. Or not. I need to look that up. Okay, so looking at the fins down here, we actually have more of a pattern that kind of flows like that. Good time to mention the importance of reference as we're doing all this. Because thinking what you know what you're doing is definitely a sort of trap that you can get yourself in if you're kind of working on concepting, and it's tempting not to. You want to just draw from your imagination, and the problem with that is most of us don't have a developed enough visual library to support that. So you see some of these concept artists that do this, every day for years, and they're able to do it. And so we think, well, we should be able to do it. And the truth is, it takes decades of work to build up that level of knowledge about what you're doing. So it's a good goal to try to shoot for, but not super realistic when you're starting out. Okay. So that could give us an interesting end there for that. Maybe this, we have kind of a mirrored thing happening here. And maybe these are like seaweed, floral leaves, who knows, but kind of indicate that there. We could have, shells or something on the outside here. Anyways, play with how this might connect, And here I'm just erasing out, the connection points. And see how that positive and negative space breaks that up, and we're able to kind of tell a little bit better what's going on in here. That's really what it's all about. Okay, let's call that good for now. Yeah, we'll get in here and play some more with the silhouette when we need to, but I need to kind of move on. So not sure that that one's going to be a winner, but not every design of this, so that's okay. Okay, so some interesting things we could do here is, you know, if this isn't working for us, free transform this, flip it a couple of directions, see kind of how this is working. And as we get in here and start painting, we can kind of just decide what we want it to become. It's an opportunity to kind of explore just a little bit, see what this is. And every now and then as I throw a stroke down, I'm kind of pausing to take a look at what I think this could be. So a lot of influence from animals. Interesting is kind of thinking about this maybe like a scorpion or something. Not really sure the anatomy of a scorpion, but I believe they're insects, so they would probably have 6 legs. Anyways, we would have to figure that out, but it's kind of an idea. And then, yeah, who knows? Maybe we take this part of the pipe, make it the stem. Yeah, not really sure how practical that is, but you know, put the hole here. But anyways, we'll see. Okay. So we'll call this another one. Maybe want to taper this a little bit, kind of fix this. So we can go to warp, just kind of play with the way this is working a little bit. So I want this to be more from the side and flatten down. So definitely want to make sure that we're accomplishing that. It's a little bit more from the top than it needs to be. But oh well. Okay. So let's see where we are right now. All right, we got an hour left. So what we're gonna start playing with is taking one of these ideas and just kind of working it up and seeing where it goes from here. And so if anybody's watching and they have any ideas of what they would like me to work on from this group right here, let me know. And I can go ahead and just kind of label these really quickly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. And I see Lauren Davies saying scorpions are arachnids and they have 8 legs. Okay, so we can go ahead and fix that while we're at it. I'm sure these legs are terrible, but you know, whatever. We'll fix that when we get further into this design, if that's the one we choose. Okay, so anybody in the chat with an opinion on which one of these you want me to work on, speak now or forever hold your peace. Go ahead and save this. I'm all ears, guys. Anybody wants to comment and leave me something they want me to work on. Oh, pinchers count as legs. Interesting. Didn't know that. Okay, let's head back to our reference here. All right, guys, I'm gonna kind of pick one to start working on here, and we'll get further into this. Okay, you like the ship number 8, this one right here. Okay, so we'll mark this one as one we can focus on. And let's take one more, narrow this down so we can have a couple that we would like to play with. So maybe, let's see, which one would I like to do? I like 3 and 4, maybe 9. Yeah, let's do 4. Okay, so now that we have these selected, what we need to do is grab these and pull them off onto a separate layer. So I'll turn these off. Something like that. And now we can kind of blow these up and play with these a little bit more. Okay, so for these, the next step, if we're gonna try to improve on these, would be to do more iterations, get in here and play with the silhouettes more, um, which I'm gonna kind of skip over tonight. And then we would go in and actually start, once we have our silhouettes figured out, we'll start figuring out the interior details. So I'm gonna go ahead and play around with this a little bit and show you how we might do that. Pick my pattern generator here, and I'm gonna create a new layer, and then holding Alt and left clicking in between the layers, I can create a clipping mask. So anything that I paint on this layer now will have to be, think of this kind of like parenting. So if I'm painting, it's only going to be painted on this layer in the middle. So if I were to switch to sort of a mid-gray value, you can see it's going to keep it on the pipe and not anywhere else. And so just by doing that, we can really quickly jump in and start to block in some interesting shapes and stuff. So what I can do is kind of play with these colors as I go and just try to get some layering built up here. And another option would be to go into the brush settings. And if I go to color dynamics, I can change this brightness jitter. So that's gonna kind of pick a random value as every time I touch, go through. And so if that's too much, we can pull this down a little bit. But basically, that will help us just implicate some detail on the inside of these. And I like to do that because it gives me kind of a starting point that I can go for. And once I have some layering in there, it's a little less intimidating to look at. So we might play with the other pattern generator here and do the same sort of thing. So color dynamics, bring that up a little bit more. And you can see if you're scaled out how from a distance this would already kind of look like it's got some detail to it, and that's kind of what you want. Just enough to implicate and fool your eye, give some texture and stuff like that. So if I zoom out, you can kind of see what that looks like. And from this, we can kind of squint our eyes and start seeing little shapes pop out here and there. And that will dictate kind of what we can do to turn this into an actual object. So once we have this, if we want to, we can zoom in here, and this is now full scale. And so what I might do is let's duplicate this, merge this down. So this is one layer now. And what I'll do is control and left click to select these outside shapes. So we've just got the silhouette selected. And then I'm going to do a filter, blur, box blur. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to expand the selection by a couple of pixels. So that way we're actually outside of those silhouettes. So when we blur it, it should get all of that in there. Okay, so we can blur these a little bit depending on how much you want to kind of paint back in those details. And this kind of does what squinting your eyes does. So we can use box blur, or Gaussian blur is a little better. And we might start somewhere around there. Okay, so I'm gonna stay zoomed out a little bit so I'm not getting too crazy with detail. And that's kind of the same idea as when we sculpt. We don't want to get way in here and start pixel peaking and all that sort of stuff, because if we change our minds and the design shifts and things like that, we have to undo all that and then go back and repaint it. And it's not worth it. So once again, let's create a little clipping mask, and then using our black brush, we'll go back to our details here, and I might switch to my chisel, kind of play with this a little bit. And you can kind of see what that's doing. So again, it's not going to paint outside of our shapes. And now we need to look at some reference to get an idea of some of these shapes that we might want to go after. So I kind of like this little ship that we have here. Zoom in so you guys can see that. Hopefully that's showing up down there. Should be. And let's play with some of these little details here for the ship and see if we can get it in here. So this would be obviously like a bigger pull out from, you know, sort of a scene of a ship, and you'd have stacks of sails and things like that going on. So let's look for something that has a little bit more of that and see if we can find something. There we go. And now I've got all of this to pull from while I'm sketching. So I don't have to make these details up. I can actually look at this one and see what's going on here. And so the key here is going to be kind of just implicating light and dark values for shadows. And so starting at the bottom down here, we're going to have the base of the ship, and kind of have this here. And I'm going to unclip this just so we can kind of start painting a little bit. So changing the silhouette a little bit, but we need to have something. For this part of it here. Okay. So some of this will be kind of a mixture of light and shadow, and some of this will be just us focusing in on the designs using light and dark values. And it's just kind of up to you as far as how much you want to push this. But a good example would be these sort of stripes on the side of the ship. And so we can quickly get in here and kind of block these in, but on the sides over here, we're going to want to implicate those. And this is paint on the ship, right? It's not this isn't sort of a 3D shape, it's just paint, but this is how we need to implicate that right there. And then we might jump in here and decide what we're doing on the end here. It might even be kind of looking at the ship, seeing if we have some sort of anchor or something. Okay. So you can see I'm not even painting details really, I'm just indicating where those light and dark values kind of meet. And then somewhere up here, we might have some designs on the ship. And that's important because it's going to set apart those details when you're further back away. So there's big shapes that have, you know, gold or paint or something like that. We need to kind of block those in there, even though they're not always going to be seen. Okay, so it looks like it's kind of an upper portion here, the lip of the ship edge. From that, we would have a big piece coming off the front here. And that's going to anchor a lot of things back into the ship. So that's a perfect example of something I probably would not have thought to put on the ship if I was just sketching this without reference. And so we need to kind of pay attention to that sort of stuff. And let's kind of move a little quicker and get through some of these areas. Thinking still about the silhouettes here. Goes all the way back. We probably have the same sort of thing on the end over here. So let's just assume that we do. And it's gonna look messy at first. And the idea is to not really focus on that. Just keep moving around, move it quick, and keep it going. So I'm just color sampling using Alt and then left clicking and here to grab light and dark gray values. And that kind of helps you get started on this sort of thing. I'm going to find another piece of reference that's off to the side. Gives a little better view of what this would look like. All of these sort of are from the front 3/4 or straight on. And I want to see kind of what we would have happening if we turned this to the side a little bit. So I'm not seeing any that are really giving me a side profile, but I did see a little diagram here that's kind of got one of these. So we just need to find something that's sort of close. Maybe this right here, this little fully rigged ship idea. And then I'm going to zoom in. We're looking at this one right here. So we got 3 sections of main sort of square sails coming up. So if we look right here, I'm going to actually switch this to black. We got looks like these sort of taper and get skinnier as they go up. So maybe something kind of like this. And we need to gauge, obviously how much this is happening. And then make sure that that's proportionate all the way down to the bottom. Okay, something kind of like that. And then these are going to come up and tie in with separate strings and ropes and all that sort of stuff going down to the bottom on the other side. So we need to copy this sort of idea kind of over here. And so let's say we got one section here. Another section right here. Make this a little bigger. Oh, that's a good question. We haven't thought about that. Where's the pipe's bowl going to go? Says Lauren Davy. Yeah, I don't know. Let's think about that. Where do you think it should go? Let's extend the ship a little bit out this way. Yeah, well, this is just going to be a set piece, so no fear. Not even our digital character is going to get harmed in this 3D illustration. Okay, so bear in mind this whole time we're doing this, the goal is not to make the prettiest piece of art you've ever seen, right? The goal is to lock down what work you're going to be doing when you get back into Blender, right? Every little area of this that we decide to put in here or not put in here is going to affect the amount of time and the energy and things that it's going to take, and maybe even whether or not we can accomplish what we're setting out to accomplish as far as some of these details. And so that has to be kind of thought out before we just jump in and start going crazy. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is to take the time to think that stuff out before we get going. And so you'll save yourself a lot of headache if you just learn to do it right now before you, get too far into your 3D process. I know it's tempting to just run in there and want to get going, but if you can learn some basic painting skills, sketching skills, things like that, you're going to be a much better 3D artist. So, not liking the smoothness here, so let's crank that up a little bit more. Okay, just a little bit of contrast we have there. Let's play a little bit. And another thing I might mention right now is, like, don't fight the brushes. So if you're spending a lot of time trying to create a certain effect with a brush and you could just switch to another brush and get the exact same thing done quickly. For example, drawing these sails in could be just a really fast process of doing this. So rather than doing kind of what we've been doing, maybe you just take a look at doing it like this. You can also keep the sizes more consistent this way and make them look a little easier on the eyes. So and this may not seem like super important what we're doing right now, but I guarantee you that figuring out the spacing on this is going to be really important when it comes time to do this in 3D, because working out these sort of design problems here just does not take nearly as much time as doing it over in Blender. So definitely remember that. Okay, so see how much faster that was compared to what we were doing. Okay, so because we're turning this on its side, it's losing some of its original silhouette, and we're kind of going outside of that. But that's okay, because we're kind of looking at and paying more attention to the reference at this point. Now, if we decide we still want to keep this, we have to ask ourselves, what would that look like? And if it's just a case where if we were to turn the pipe this way and we look straight on and it ends up getting the same sort of effects, kind of like these other reference images, then we're doing kind of what we should be doing. because when we get to a point where we have these shown in different views, front to back and things like that, we're going to be getting the same sort of tall, conic type of silhouette happening. So for right now, we're trying to go from a side view perspective, and that's really what I'm trying to get in here. So let us keep going. Okay, so at this point, I can start kind of playing with some of these, getting some of these ropes and things in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove just any super excess silhouette stuff so that we're not letting that get in the way of the design. I'm not going to bother erasing all this stuff because it would probably be pretty busy in there. But now we can go ahead and play with kind of what this would look like. And so I've got this triangular sketch brush, like really small and tapered down, so I can just really quickly get in here and just sketch these ropes. And we need to make sure we have these in here. And it looks like I need to kind of focus more on the way these are shaped because they're not just blocks. So this is where really paying attention to your reference is key because they're more like little fans like this. So I'm just gonna kind of quickly get in here and make sure we've got that shape happening. And, you know, towards the top, it's a little less important, but I still probably want to get it in there. But you got to remember, these are, this is fabric. It's being draped over, you know, skeletal sort of masts and things like that. And so here again, our positive and negative space is coming into play. Let's see what that's doing there. Okay, so let's bring these back a little bit. And we can think about the story too as we get in here and we kind of sketch, you know. Is this a brand new sort of ship that's just been launched? Are we looking at a pirate ship? Are we looking at, you know, a ship used by the Royal Navy? You know, what are we going for here? And let whatever decision, you know, we decide kind of drive the little details. So if we have sections in here that are, you know, from a pirate ship and they've been out on this treasure hunt and, you know, they've been beaten up and gone into battle and had cannons fired at them and all this sort of stuff. It's like, well, okay, so would there be holes and things? You know, would you have sails that kind of look more like that in terms of how they're being portrayed here on this carving? And it's, again, it's really kind of all up to you. So here we go. This can really be a lot of fun if you enjoy getting in here and kind of playing with ideas. And I don't know if I would want to do this all day, every day, but it's a nice break sometimes from working with polygons. Getting pretty close here. All right, let's get back to our ropes. Okay. So also got some side sail sort of things happening here. If you a little trick is if you want to draw straighter lines in Photoshop, practicing straight lines is always a good thing. But if you left click somewhere and then hold shift and just left click again somewhere, it will draw a straight line between, and it will tend to taper that based on what you're drawing. And that's because usually you have something like pen pressure turned on in shape dynamics. But if you turn this off, you want to draw straight lines, you can do it that way too. And it's a fast way to kind of block those in. So in our case, we can lower the size a little bit and then just use this as a guide to draw these straight lines for us. So I'm just going to kind of approximate here what this looks like. Okay, call that good. And yeah, so that might be kind of an interesting basic design. And then if we wanted to kind of subtly come in here and play with how this was looking, could jump to maybe some of our regular brushes over here. Grab a soft round, increase the size a bit. And then let's say we want to brush in a little bit of value just to split these sails up a little bit. Grab a lighter color and then kind of do something kind of like this where we're layering on this opacity. Doesn't take much to kind of get these looking like they got a little bit of lighting on them. Something kind of like that. And then if you really want to get in here and kind of play, you can kind of start messing with these edges a little bit where the light would be peeking through the way that these are attached through their little ropes or whatever that's going through the edges of these. And so the sun was kind of shining through these. This is kind of what would be happening. Something like this. We might even, again, get in here and just block in some light right in here on both sides. And what's cool about that is you're almost getting sort of a subsurface scattering effect where you're seeing the mast kind of blurry through the other side of these sails. Kind of see what that's doing there. Yeah, there we go. And let's quickly get in here and play with cleaning up the stem, and then we'll move on to the other one. All right, join that down. And then let's create a new layer and we'll start painting on top of this again. Okay, grab our triangle sketch. I want this to be sort of our middle gray tone that we use for this pipe. And then for these upper areas, details, maybe we use something like this. And obviously we can have carvings and all sorts of fun stuff going on this pipe in terms of the length of it and stuff like that. Now what I kind of like to do on these areas is grab a lighter color and kind of make this feel like a cylinder by wrapping in some other values around this edge. So we might not want anything super bright except for on the tops of these shapes where a highlight from a lamp or something would be hitting this. But doing just a little bit of that, you can kind of hint at the roundness of this shape. And maybe that it's reflective, and you can add in little highlights and things like that as you go. And it's really about getting a really nice grayscale read of the entire object. And that tells you a little bit about the form, you know, what is going to go into modeling this in terms of how we're going to get all of this stuff, you know, created. And getting up to at least that level is good because it gives you at least enough to have a roadmap for what to work on. See, even on these little edges here, you don't want to, you know, spend too much time on this or, you know, get obsessed about these details, but you just want to indicate, you know, indication is what we're kind of doing here. So maybe put some parallel lines that indicate a little bit of more of a man-made structure and railing and things like that. And then back in here, I want to darken these back down, doing the same basic process. Things like that. Okay, so obviously we will spend more time kind of going in here and working on these details, but this is the basic idea for how you would get going on a design and block this sort of stuff in. So the next step for this process might be going in here and doing an even further refinement pass where we blow this up again, zoom in, and detail all these little areas out even more. And depending on how we feel about this design, that may be kind of what I do. But it will just depend on if we like where this is headed. So let's do a little bit of cleanup on these sails. And I'm not really sure where the smoke would come out of on this one. There's a lot of areas we kind of just throw a hole in there, and might be fun to do kind of like cannon openings here on the sides and have them come out of there. So, you know, we could jump in here and create, you know, 6 holes, 3 on each side, and then kind of have them come out of there. Might be fun. And then maybe this top lid comes off, and that's kind of where you would put your tobacco and all that sort of stuff in there. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, so we'll call that one done. Get a drink real fast. Let's play with this one. Okay, so for this one, maybe we can do some waves or something like that. Looking at some of these designs, look at something like this, where we have a lot of, you know, pen and ink sort of drawings in terms of how they simplified these shapes. And that's a good thing to look at for just kind of seeing ideas of how they would handle something like this for our particular object over here. And so let's play with some of this stuff. So here's some basic stylized wave drawings here. We can use these as, you know, looking at these swirls and how they're put together will tell us a little bit about how we would need to, you know, lead one swirl on our pipe into another to create the effects that we're after. So let's play with that a little bit. Then I believe, yeah, about 15 minutes left. So let's see what we can get done in 15 minutes. Okay, start back here. Let's take our smoothing up to about 30. Okay. And do a clipping mask there. And let's play a little bit. So we got a bit of a swirl here happening with the way this is coming around. So it might be something like that. Got another swirl up here. So that would come around at the bottom edge of it over here. And it's really just about depth. You know, how do we build in depth on this and create these sort of layered wave effects? So one of the things, as we swoop around here, we come up over and do something like this. Might be sort of a natural way to tie those together. And then up here, we're gonna have sort of another wave. And eventually these have to sort of connect up into a design. So we have to see what we can do to make that work for us. So this is sort of coming up and splashing over, and then maybe we have sort of multiple stacks of waves over there. I'm not sure. We can play with that a little bit. So with that idea in mind, the lighter color will make it feel like it is sort of in the foreground. And then if we want to recess anything, we can just throw a darker value there. So we can create sort of layered effects like this. This is where, if I was in my sketchbook, I would just spend a long time going in and exploring little wave patterns and maybe things off to the side to make sure I kind of knew what I was doing. And I like to sketch in an ink pen, ballpoint pen, so I tend to make mistakes and then just start new sketches. And I like that because it really builds your confidence and keeps you from spending all of your time just erasing things and starting over. And you end up spending more of your time erasing than you spend sketching sometimes. So it's good to kind of pay attention to what's going on and see where you can improve. And for me, that was one of those areas that once I started kind of tackling sketching that way, it was hard, at first to let go of the process of erasing all the time, but it really made me a better artist. So, okay, so this is one solution to how we might be able to do this. I'm at a point now where, because I'm using clipping mask, it's kind of hard to get outside of these and correct these edges. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge this and now just kind of play with how this is working so we can kind of see what we need to do to make this into a better design. So I think something like that might work a little better. And play a little bit with getting rid of this. So something a little bit more like that. Pull the chat back up and make sure I'm not getting behind. Okay, we're good. So just by varying these lights and dark contrasted areas, we're able to really add a sense of sort of depth. And if you're familiar with depth maps in 3D, it's exactly the same idea. We're utilizing things that are closer to us being lighter values, things that are further away from us being darker values. And makes it easy to read what's going on, and it's ultimately kind of the mission. Okay, so it's kind of fun the way this comes down and around, loops back up here, kind of looking for a way to tie all of this in. So maybe it would be something like this, where we're coming around here. And what's fun is like we could even play with adding like drops of water. If you look at more Japanese style, uh, you know, um, influence for the way these work, they have like every drop of water in some of their like wood cuts and things like that being shown. And it's so pretty and just sometimes bizarre looking. So this really has character. It's like the wave is almost kind of alive here. It's coming around and rearing its head and about to crash back over here and all this sort of stuff. Um, so play with the scale too as well. So for every big wave, we can zoom in a little bit sometimes and create smaller variations of that wave. And that will kind of increase the visual complexity as we go. Make our concept here a little bit more interesting. So see here, just these little bitty variations on these waves really kind of make this stand out as unique and gives your eye something to kind of move around and look at. And the same way these smaller lines here would help you visualize, what's going on. So this sort of breakup that's happening is really important. And this is just about starting to get less loose and paying more attention to detail and, not moving as quickly. But this all needs to be done after you've worked out the bigger questions or problems in your design, which is the overall silhouette, how it's supposed to look, all the things we talked about tonight. And if you've already figured that stuff out, then it's time to get in there and start really kind of tackling those little bitty details. But I think far too often we get impatient and we want to jump in and start playing with the fun stuff. And we don't spend nearly enough time working on the stuff that will make our designs or anything we're working on for that matter just better, because we're not focusing on those fundamentals, So we're getting a little lost here in what we're trying to accomplish. Kind of play with some of these shapes a little bit and make sure that's coming across clear. So smooth, big sweeping shapes for the bigger areas, and then, coming back up and around over here in a way that feels like water. And again, looking at reference as we do this to make sure we're kind of in the ballpark as we go. Each of these little areas could have subwaves kind of coming off. And they can't be bigger than the big wave. Obviously, it'll overpower it. But just enough to kind of make it feel ominous. Pull those back a little bit, a little too far out there. And then by using some of these patterns as the wave is rising that repeat, we can establish sort of a visual language of how these need to look. So we're going to repeat this little stream kind of jutting out over here on the sides. And because that repeats all the way up, you feel that wave kind of wrapping around. And make an impact, you know. All right, let's end tonight. We're gonna wrap the stem up, and we're gonna call it good. Now, what I would typically do after this point is, again, probably focus a lot more time and effort into the design, making sure that I'm happy with the way these forms are kind of communicating with the viewer. And the more time you spend on this phase, the better your 3D work will look, because you'll have been spending all of your time in the pre-production phase solving really all the problems. Because if you know what you're doing here, when you get into 3D, it's going to be a lot less challenging to make things look realistic. Your designs will already pretty much be worked out, so you're not going to have problems with things reading and all of that. And that's really the best advice I can give you to kind of level up your game, is focus on your fundamentals, not just in 3D, but here. And yeah, so let's get in here and kind of work on this pipe stem. Kind of like what that design is doing there, breaking that up a little bit. So I might keep that. It's funny how it almost looks like a little bit of an Argyle pattern or something. And again, here we can use some of those repeating elements from the design to help us kind of sell the idea of this pattern coming down. So maybe we have these mirrored on both sides, and the colors are shifting in and out and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so we'll tighten up this outer edge here. Make sure our profile here is doing what we want it to do. Just adding little accents like that with the connection part and little pieces around there to make it feel, you know, a little bit more solid, like it was put together and made and all that sort of stuff. Put some little horizontal hash marks going up, kind of indicate some notches or something happening here. Maybe some shading, I don't really know. Okay, and what we can do is kind of give it a core shadow running through the middle of it. Grab one of these darker colors and jump back over to our soft round brush. Let's pull this down to about 50%. We'll just kind of pull that through the middle. Now I want this to be a pretty dark color to indicate the core shadow. So pull this around, make sure we've got our smoothing turned up. See how much easier that makes drawing that line. Take my time, make sure it's working, and not really have to worry about it. Okay. All right. I think for tonight, that's about all the time we have. But that gives you a pretty good idea of how to get started with some concept art as you're working on your 3D ideas. And the next part of this process is going to be to take these, zoom in, figure out some more of the details. We'll get it working in black and white and grayscale. And then we would be focusing in on actually taking this and possibly doing a 3/4 perspective sketch to make sure we've solved all of those form issues. And if you know how to do that, that's really, really valuable to help you save a lot of time as you sculpt, because you've already solved, again, all of your problems before you get into 3D. And so before we get done, one little final step, which kind of adds a little bit of polish here, is we jump into our soft rounds, can raise the size here. I always like to do a little bit of presentation, so just create a little bit of a drop shadow here. And if you want something a little bit more realistic, what you might do is kind of mimic the shape of your silhouette a little bit. So because these are straight down, they would actually be following the top down view, but you can kind of get away with a little bit of fudging. So if you did something kind of like this, it's a little better, and you kind of want it right under it like that. And then of course over here, we're gonna have the same sort of thing on this side. Want them to kind of feel like they're on the same ground plane here. So floating in the air a little bit. There we go. And then Gaussian blur this a little bit. Make it a little bit more convincing. And once again, go back and kind of play with that a little bit. I would lower the opacity down pretty low to add in some of those final like subtleties, things like that. But when it gets to here, obviously you're going to have a bigger footprint, so you want to kind of block in a bigger piece here, and then you'd have little shadows for the sails and things like that. But basically, that's all there is to it. And there you go. So guys, hope you enjoyed the live stream tonight. I'm not really sure what next week's schedule is going to look like yet. I need to take a look. If you enjoyed tonight and you want to see more concept painting, you can take these quite a bit further and do some more mock-ups, 3/4 views, things like that, sketching. If you're into that, I'd be happy to share some more of my tips for how to do that and teach you a little bit about perspective sketching, things like that. And next week we'll jump back into the 3D illustration project. If you haven't seen those, they're on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching anywhere else right now, head on over to YouTube and search Brandon Hicks, BRANDONHIX. And my channel has about 22 hours of streams that are live right now that you can see for this month's 3D illustration. So thank you for tuning in today, guys, and have a good weekend, and I'll see you later. Thanks.